Good morning, Manchester City back on top of the Premier League after a 2-1 win over Nottingham Forest at the City Ground. An emotional City Ground following the passing on Christmas Day of Forest legend John Robertson. Hello everyone, my name's Mark Donaldson alongside Janusz Mihalik to look back on what we saw. Arsenal, of course, still with a game in hand, but City top for now, Janusz. And if City do go on to win the title, and it's a big if right now, we're only halfway there, these are the type of games where you're not at your best, but you still find a way to get all 3 points that lead to being that competitive.
Absolutely. I mean, it's one of the games that at this stage you have to grind out. And, when you talk about Manchester City, they don't often grind games out, but they were pressed to do it, right? I mean, both teams scored the first goals with the first shot on target. The first half wasn't good. And Nottingham Forest very well organized, as you'd expect from Sean Dyche. And then, when Manchester City scored right after halftime, and it was such a Manchester City goal, right? Something that was missing in the first half with Cherki, that opening pass, and that finish. You thought that City is going to go on, but a quick answer from Nottingham Forest. And after that, it really looked to me like it was going to be a draw, and 2 massive points dropped when it comes to that race that you've mentioned against Arsenal. So very, very significant win for Manchester City away in that race for a Premier League title.
Massive. This is not the... Yeah, it was. And this is not the Nottingham Forest that we've seen previously this season, whether it's under Ange Postecoglou or Nuno at the beginning of the season. They've got a spine now under Sean Dyche. They might not create as much, but they're a different type of team. And the way they played today, partly the role of spoilers. I didn't think there was much in that first half. Morgan Gibbs-White had a chance. City had a couple of looks as well. I thought Forest dealt very well with Haaland, and I don't think anybody could argue with the sides going in at the break level.
No, it was just one of those games that, when you see Forest as disciplined defensively as they were, sitting back, right? I think in the first half you saw Manchester City with that Christmas tree formation, still appropriate, I think, to say that, in that shape with Haaland and 2 tens in behind him, and it was Cherki and Phil Foden. That changed in the second half, right? With Cherki going wide before Savinho, of course, came in after that. But I think Pep Guardiola knew that he needed to stretch that team as much as they possibly could, and it paid dividends. That, as I said, that intricate passing on that first goal, that through ball, was so significant. But part of it was because of that width for Manchester City. So yes, the first half, 0 shots on target from either side, for sure. But Manchester City, one thing that you have to say about Manchester City is that they're always patient, and they've been in these games so many times where they possess the ball, when they probe, when they try to split you, and even if it doesn't work, they don't go away from that. And even after Forest equalized, they continue to do the same, and they eventually found a goal, albeit on a corner, and a wonderful Rayan Cherki strike.
City are on a really good run of form right now. That's 8 consecutive wins. It's their best since December 2023, when they managed 11 consecutive wins. You've played the game, Janusz. When you're in a team that is winning every week, like City are right now, there's this skill that players have, and it's a kind of, don't panic, we'll find a way somehow. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But when you're on that run, when you've got that momentum, how big a thing is that for players in a belief that we can get this done, we'll get it done eventually?
Look, I mean, let's be honest here. First and foremost, they've done it before. Those famous runs where Manchester City have been winning. They have the know-how. They've thrown the gauntlet to Arsenal. I think this win is so important. They may very well be, at least for me, at the moment. I gotta be sorry, Arsenal, but they're favorites to win the title because they have the know-how. They know how to do it, and they're not even at their best. And they're on an 8th run winning streak right now. I mean, they've had 3 clean sheets today. Obviously, they didn't continue that. But you look at this Manchester City team, and you say to yourself, this is the part of the season that they've been in so many times, and they've proven so many times that they've got the nerve. And, I'd really be worried if I'm Arsenal right now. Because think about it. I mean, they still have Rodri to come in, and he's going to be coming into a team that's happy, that's organized, because Manchester City had finally found the balance, right? The defensive balance they didn't have. They've always been scoring goals. That wasn't their problem, right? But defensively, there's been issue. Now there's a steady back four and a steady team, because there was a lot of rotation. Remember, Mark, I think if I'm right, the last time they lost was against Leverkusen, and that was the time. Remember, Pep Guardiola rotated pretty much the entire team, and they lost that game at home. Since that game, they've won everything in all competitions. Right now, steady back four, steady team, not a lot of changes. Some players, obviously, international duty, but for the most part, this is the team right now that Pep Guardiola, I think, is going to ride until the end of the season. And, I mean, you have to be honest, and they're favorites. As I said, Rodri is going to still come into a great team. And who knows? What about somebody like Kovacic, who we've forgotten about, right? That's going to come in February, March. He's going to give you that extra oomph, if you will, for the lack of a better word. So, look, this was a massive win for Manchester City.
Bookies disagree with you. The bookies in the UK have still got Arsenal as favourites. Not as much favourites after the early result with Manchester City winning, but they still have Arsenal a shade of odds on. Manchester City have understandably been cut. So obviously, look, it's totally subjective. You think Man City are favourites. Therefore, Manchester City are the value. Arsenal right now odds on favourites. They've still got to play later this weekend. So Manchester City, I've got the points on the board. As you say, they know how to get the job done. What did you make of their opening goal today, Manchester City, with Tijani Reinders? Because he started the season really well. Then, I'm not saying there was a dip in form, but he didn't get the goals that he was getting at the start of the season, and now he's involved again.
Look, one pass from Rayan Cherki opened us up, right? I mean, it was tremendous. And it was that change because Reinders has moved up a little bit. It was almost in the second half, as I've said. In the first half, bit of a Christmas tree. In the second half, Reinders played a little bit higher. It was almost four behind Haaland, right? Because Bernardo Silva has moved up. Cherki went out right. Once again, once Savinho came in, then Cherki went inside once again. But I thought it was that movement that was missing in the first half, because obviously Manchester City dominated, but they just couldn't find that one opening. They're so patient, and they're not afraid to squeeze the ball in this traffic that we had in the first half. And that pass was exactly what you remember of Manchester City at their absolute best when they were winning titles every season. So Rayan Cherki is look. I mean, we've seen what he's been doing lately. We often talk about David Silva. We talk about Ilkay Gundogan. We talk about Kevin De Bruyne, right? And, between Foden now, whose form is better, although he didn't have a great game today, but Rayan Cherki is kind of filling that void, isn't he? That kind of master vision from him, a goal and an assist today. So again, another player that's coming into form right now and is getting used to the system of Pep Guardiola and Premier League in general.
Yeah, Wi-Fi issues there. Apologies. That goal, I want to have a look at it again. Look how many people are involved. Look how many players are involved. Look at the direction. Look how patient they are. It starts with the goalkeeper. It goes left. It comes to the right-hand side. It then goes back to the left-hand side. I mean, Pep Guardiola is going to look at that, and he's going to see how many players, different numbers, are involved. And he's going to love that goal. That is a proper team goal, that opener.
Yeah, but you know what he's going to love? He's not going to love all that. He's seen that a million times where everybody touches the ball. I think he's going to love that final pass where Nottingham Forest were, defending 6 yards away from their goal, and Manchester City still finds a way to get behind it. That is what he's going to love, because that's Manchester City at their best. The triangles, the ability to find players in tight spots where you're not afraid to make that pass, and timing of the run and all that. That's what he's going to love. The fact in between, that's nothing new to him.
But you still got to do it, and they did that, and they scored that goal without Erling Haaland, who didn't have a single touch in the opposition box today, held without a single shot, a single touch in the opposition box. He was held without a single shot, Erling Haaland, on target in a match for the first time in his last 22 games. And when you have someone like him, and we know he can be a match winner, we know he can score 2, 3, 4 goals in a game. When you don't get that, that doesn't necessarily mean that he's not involved, because he's still got to take the attention of the defenders. So when you've got others that can score that type of goal without him having a single shot in that game, that's key. But it wasn't long before Nottingham Forest were back on level terms. What did you like most about their goal?
Yeah, look very similar to some degree to that one of Manchester City, right? Because one pass decided all, although there were two passes. But I'm talking about Morgan Gibbs-White, the way he released Igor Jesus, and the cutback, and of course Omari Hutchinson was all by himself. But the build up to that was very similar, and that's something. Although we expect that of Manchester City, we don't expect that from Nottingham Forest, not that often anyway. So I think the execution and of course the timing was very important, because the answer from Nottingham Forest was very, very quick. So the build-up was good. We know how good they are. They're certainly not as bad as the table shows, but they'll worry because they were in that game. And I think if you look at that, you say to yourself, this was an opportunity to gain an important point against an opposition like Manchester City. But the goal itself was superb.
Omari Hutchinson with a lovely finish beyond goalkeeper Donnarumma. And as you would expect, with City having been pegged back, they did press forward, they pushed forward, and John Victor, the Forest for Sells in goal, had a really good save to deny Phil Foden. City kept knocking. Before they scored, were you thinking, I'm not sure they're going to get another chance to get that goal as good as the Phil Foden effort, or were you always confident that, given City's players and abilities in the subs that were made, they obviously brought on Savinho for Reinders to give them a bit more attacking impetus. Did you always think they were going to get that one more chance?
Yeah, I've learned that through the years. City is one of the very few teams in the Premier League in general where I never think that it's over, right? They're always capable. There's going to be games there have been games where they press and press and press and don't find that pass as well. Even last season when they struggle, Manchester City always has the ability to decide the game in a second as well. So as I've said, I've never given up on that. I've given up on their spirit. I've given up maybe on the belief that they can push themselves to do it again and again. I've given up a little bit on last season on Pep Guardiola. In general, that motivation that is so hard and we don't talk about often enough. After you keep winning over and over and over and over again, how do you get these players? How does Pep Guardiola get them to fight for it again? And here we are once again in that spot where they may be even more motivated than in the past.
You mentioned that Leverkusen defeat, and that was their last one. That came on the back of a defeat at Newcastle. And there were one or two questions asked. This isn't something that happens to City very often, back-to-back defeats. You've got to remember as well, earlier this season, they were 5th, 6th in the table. They were a long way behind. How much is the old course and distance form for those that like horse racing, those that have been there before, those that have won on that track? When you know you're against an Arsenal side that you and others at ESPN FC have said are the best footballing side, this was prior to December, but now you know you're against a City side that might not be at their best right now, but have done course and distance before. How much of a concern is that for others, that City know how to get it done when others aren't so sure?
Well, massive, because the way Arsenal have been playing, let's be honest, out of this world. When you look at depth of squad, right, we always marvel at Manchester City, and you look at Arsenal, and we're going to see him and talk about him pretty soon, and depth of that squad is quite incredible. So many game changers on the pitch and on the bench as well. If you look at the results and how Arsenal have been playing, you almost can't do much better than Arsenal have done. And here we are, with City top of the table by 1 point, and that's what that is what would worry me about Manchester City, because how much better can Arsenal get as opposed to Manchester City, who are nowhere near, I don't think, of being perfect or at the level. Can they be at that level with that squad? Maybe not. Maybe not. I think overall, looking at that squad, they're a little bit short. But again, the question mark for me will be is when Rodri comes back, and I'm sure he's been back once already, and maybe too early. So I'm sure it's going to be a steady and slow, or slow and steady in terms of bringing him in. But if he gets to his level, if you recover the players once March and April comes in, where you're going to have all players available, and you're not going to be worried about international breaks too much and all of that. The know-how and experience is very important, because for Arsenal, everything from now on until the end of the season, every pundit, every fan, everywhere is going to be talking about, can they do it? We know about Arsenal, February, March, April, when they falter, right? With Manchester City, you can't say that, because they've proven over and over that they can do it. That pressure is immense pressure on Arsenal.
The number of times as well, City have kind of just been there or thereabouts. They seem to be better at coming from behind to chase a lead. They're very good at holding on to a lead, and once they get it, then it's usually good night. However, when they've been in the past chasing teams down, a lot of the teams crack. That's the final game of 2025, Manchester City. They begin February at Spurs. I want to give you their January fixtures for Manchester City. They start on New Year's Day at Sunderland. It's then Chelsea at home, Brighton at home. These are just Premier League fixtures because they've got FA Cup and League Cup ties. So they've got Sunderland away, Chelsea at home, Brighton at home, Manchester United away, and Wolves at home. It's not a bad run of games, is it?
No, it isn't. But I stopped thinking about that, because every game, I mean, that's obvious in Premier League, is a banana skin. And that's what it's going to be, right? Because the first half of the season is somewhat easy, because you don't think about where you may or may not be. But now it's desperation, right? Desperation for some to save themselves. And every game is a 6-pointer, really. And I know these are cliches, but, even when I play, and obviously I didn't play in the Premier League, but first half of the season was always, you always thought a result is what the result is. It has no implication. Somehow you think that way. You don't think about what a win, a draw, or loss may mean when the season is on the line and it's over. Now that comes into play. That sort of pressure. We've mentioned Arsenal, mentioned Manchester City, but you've mentioned teams like Wolves, who everybody thinks is going to go down. Everybody's going to be desperate. Everyone's going to be fighting, and on a day they can find a way against the best.
Let's talk about Rayan Cherki, because he's someone who the talent is always there. It's the involvement in games that has been a little bit hit or a miss, but right now it's definitely a hit. I want to show you a graphic involving Rayan Cherki and his involvements today. How important a player is he becoming for this Manchester City side in this Manchester City setup?
He's their true playmaker. I've mentioned David Silva, Gundogan, maybe to a lesser degree, but he was important, obviously, as well. Kevin De Bruyne, how important he was in terms of, Erling Haaland, assists, goals, and ability to drive the team. And we don't know how good Rayan Cherki can still be. I think he's slowly showing us how he fits and why he is at Manchester City, because he can play anywhere across the line, right? You can plug him in just about anywhere. I think he's working right now not to gain the trust of Manchester City, but I think he's shown game in and game out that he's the one that when the game's on the line, he needs to get the ball. And that's the most important thing when you play for a team like Manchester City, because everyone feels that way. I've mentioned those names for a while. Bernardo Silva was that sort of a player, right? 2 seasons ago, remember Phil Foden, right? Player of the season. Last year, obviously, wasn't good. The European Championships weren't good for him. He suffered, but he seems to be rediscovering his form. As I've mentioned today, maybe not at his best. So I think if you're talking about Rayan Cherki, we don't even know how good he can be. So for the rest of the season, just watching him last few games, I think he's just coming into his own. He's finding his feet. And I'm just guessing here, Mark, but I think he's probably saying to himself, you know what? I can run this team. I can be the focal point of Manchester City. And we're starting to see that. We'll see if he actually becomes one.
There's pressure as well. on a 22-year-old who was signed from Lyon for under 40 million euros. That's a lot of money, of course, but as far as Manchester City's concerned, it's someone that they maybe saw to have an immediate impression and maybe saw as someone that they could really have a part to play going forward. Now, I want to have a look at the second goal and his involvement in this, because when he was at Lyon, he was more of an assist maker than a goal scorer, 14 goals in 146 games. But when he's playing in that kind of inside position, inside left or inside right, he offers a different dimension. The second goal was simple, right? But it's more his entire involvement in games. And is it about belief now? Does he just have to believe that he can be a key player for Manchester City? Because he's certainly got the talent.
I, of course, don't know him, but I absolutely think he believes. As I've said, it's more of a, earning sort of the place within the team where everybody else believes that he can run the game. And maybe they're already there, right? Because, scoring goals is important. But I think for Rayan Cherki, for Manchester City to be absolutely successful, to win the title in the Premier League, maybe be in a position to win the Champions League, I think Rayan Cherki's got to be more of a playmaker and assist maker than goal scorer. Goals are going to be bonus for him. And we've seen he scores some wonderful goals. He's not afraid to do it from distance as well. He's got the technique to score every which way possible. You've mentioned pressure. Players like Cherki don't feel pressure. They wouldn't be here, right? When you play with such ease at such a young age, those players, game like this is any game that you would play in the playground to anywhere, right? I mean, that's the difference between good and great players, that they don't feel pressure. They go out there, they don't see the 50, 80,000 people in the stands, right? They're not afraid to make difficult moves. They're not afraid if they lose the ball, what the manager may say. That's the difference, right? When you look at a player like that who can do just about anything with the ball, there is no pressure. There really isn't any pressure. If I could get in his head, I could do some of these things, but I was sometimes afraid to do it. There are many players that have the skills of Rayan Cherki, but afraid to make the difficult decisions, or maybe afraid to think what the manager may say when you lose the ball. That's not Rayan Cherki. So I just think that if he becomes that guy that supplied that ball for the first goal consistently, then Manchester City have a player and a half on their hands.
Yeah, he was outstanding today. He got the winning goal. It puts City top. Arsenal kick off shortly against Brighton with a chance for them to leapfrog City again and to go top. I just want to end on Nottingham Forest because they're fourth bottom. There's a little bit of a gap, 5 points right now to West Ham in 18th. I just think they've got the right manager. We saw today he's got them well organised. They nearly got a point out of this one. They should be okay this season, shouldn't they?
Yeah, I think there will be, right. I mean, we all know about their ability at home. I mean, this is a team that's, in terms of defensive organization with Sean Dyche, they showed up throughout the game, really, in particular in the first half. They can do it, right? The question is, how much can they do forward? I think the game is simple for them. I've watched them, just about every game this season, and even though players change, I mean, without the width and the wide players, they don't have much. So it was good to see Omari Hutchinson scoring. I don't know if you remember that big chance they had in the first half where Hudson-Odoi delivered a wonderful cross. Yeah. And I think it was Morgan Gibbs-White and Igor Jesus. They've got in each other's way, because that should have been a goal, right? I think if they get Chris Wood, of all people, right? I mean, Sean Dyche knows him, the Twin Towers. Mark, you remember that at Burnley, right? Ashley, who was it? Was Chris Wood and Ashley Barnes, I think, if I remember. Well, they don't have Barnes, but they have Chris Wood, who, remember, had a great season last year. He's had an injury right now. If he comes back, obviously he's the sort of player that can do what Igor Jesus can do, but I think it's clinical. Set pieces are very important. So look, if the wide players play well, Forest could be a much more of a formidable team. When they don't, man, they're very, very limited, right? I mean, they're strong. We all know about Elliot Anderson. Once again, quietly today, absolutely outstanding. If you look at his statistic, if you look at him, the way he kept the rhythm, the way he covered for others, the way he wins the ball, that's important. Sangare comes back. That's a great option, because you saw Douglas Luiz in the last game. I think it was against Fulham, not very good at all. right? So, today was Nicolas Dominguez. Okay, nothing special, but that part is very important because it protects the back four as well. You have Murillo, who's wonderful together with Milinkovic. Murillo, if the rumors are true, even Barcelona are looking at him. I don't know, but he's obviously good enough. Change and goal, which is significant as of late. But I think Sean Dyche will get him right, and they shouldn't be where they are on the table.
Hopefully we'll get Janusz some new Wi-Fi for when we return in a couple of hours' time. 5 games about to kick off. Our focus will be on Arsenal against Brighton and Liverpool against Wolves. We'll see you again live right here in a couple of hours' time. Bye for now.